You must realize also that in those days the institution of marriage was not what it is today. Marriage, at the time of the rise and development of Christianity, was a social institution for creating alliances between families. You did not marry the person of your own choice, except under the most peculiar circumstances. You married the girl your family picked out for you, and they thought it over carefully from its political point of view as well as from the perspective of eugenics. They considered whether this was a good, healthy girl, and whether this was a good, healthy man. There was an economic bargaining involved. When you married this girl, you were not necessarily in love with her. And it was perfectly well understood in the secular world that on the side you had other arrangements. If you could afford them, you had concubines or even second, third, and fourth wives. These subsidiary wives allowed for more personal choice than the first wife, whose selection was strictly a family arrangement. That is the context, don't forget that. What the church was saying at the time was simply this: the woman who should be your bedfellow is the one whose marriage has been arranged by paternal authority. The idea of romantic love does not emerge in connection with marriage until the troubadour cults of southern France, Provence, in the late Middle Ages. This is when the idea of the idealization of woman as an inspiring goddess, almost for the knight-errant, begins to take shape. Dante's Beatrice, for example, is the inspiring woman who leads him to heaven. Historians today are not in agreement as to whether the ladyloves of the chivalrous knights were, in fact, their mistresses or simply idealized women. Either way, the influence of the cult of romantic love on the West was profound. It brought about a curious combination of ideas: the notion that marriage should be the only licit relationship for sexual activity, the notion that the girl you marry should be the one you have fallen in love with. Two more ill-adjusted ideas could hardly be put together. Naturally, when you love someone very much in the enthusiasm of youth, you say things that are neither logical nor rational. You might stand up before an altar and proclaim, "My darling, my sweetheart, my perfect pet, I adore you so much that I will live with you forever and ever, until death do us part." That is how you feel at the time. In a rather similar mood, ancient people would hail their kings and say, "O king, live forever." Obviously, this was not meant literally. They were just wishing him a long life. But live forever? No, sir, no mortal does that. The trouble was that this kind of extravagant poetic expression, when it fell into the hands of people like Augustine or Tertullian, who were influenced by Roman literalists, was written into the law books. And thus, this amazing situation arose. But we still haven't fully explored the subtlety of it. Let us consider certain periods when this attitude of prudery toward sexuality was in ascendancy. The closest to our time is the bourgeois revolution in Victorian England and the United States. We use Victorian as an adjective to indicate prudishness, extreme monogamy, and a definite disgust for all things sexual. Yet, when we examine the history of the Victorian period, we find it was an extremely lascivious epoch. One has only to look at the lushness of Victorian furniture to see this. Chairs were disguised women. Even piano legs reflected this influence. Victorian art forms and the conduct of the British aristocracy during that period beg description. People like Freud and Havelock Ellis made a certain mistake. They said about the church and religion in general that it was nothing but a form of sublimated sex. They argued, these people, for curious reasons, suppressed sex, and therefore it became a very powerful force for them. They worked on a hydraulic analogy of human psychology, likening it to a river. If you dammed it up, they claimed, it would burst the dam. However, it does not actually follow that human psychology is hydraulic. This was merely their metaphor. The church, of course, replied, it is nothing of the kind. This reduction of everything to sex is just a way of attacking holy things. On the contrary, we say that people who are fascinated with sex and make it their god are repressing religion. Here lies the problem. Both sides missed the point. The church should have said to Freud, thank you very much. Yes, our symbolism is indeed sexual. The steeples of our churches, the vesicle-shaped windows, and heraldic shields bearing images of the crucifix or the Virgin Mother of God. All these are plainly sexual. But sexual biology, in its turn, reveals the mysteries of the universe. Sex is not mere sex. It is a holy thing, one of the most marvelous revelations of the divine. But imagine, the church simply could not say that. If you look at Tibetan Buddhist iconography or Hindu temples, you will find images that Europeans and Americans have never understood. Buddhas and gods are depicted in amazing diversions with their female counterparts. People often think these are obscene sculptures, but they are not. They convey that the play of man and woman, at the biological level, mirrors the fundamental play of the cosmos. The interplay of positive and negative principles, light and dark, mental and material, all play together. Sexual play for humans is not merely about reproduction. It brings partners closer in an intense state of unity. It is a sacrament, the outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace, manifesting love. So, to say human sexuality should only be carried out in the way animals do it is nonsense. Humans have evolved to make sex a sacramental expression of love, which itself is a form of divine possession. Falling in love, often seen as a kind of madness, is akin to mystical vision or grace. The song, Every Little Breeze Whispers Louise, captures this state of mystical intoxication, where the ideal woman becomes a goddess. And that, truly, is what every woman is, if you see her with the scales off your eyes. Likewise, every man, seen with clarity, is divine. This historical misunderstanding between religious prudery and naturalist rebellion has led to mutual name-calling. Neither side has grasped the central truth, that sexual repression often makes it more intriguing, and that sexual biology is a reflection of cosmic play. As a result, society is and on the other, those who want them up to the neck. This ongoing tension, where neither side wins, is what keeps life exciting. Imagine if the libertines won. The church might turn Wednesday evening prayer groups into sex rituals. Schools might conduct hygienic, clinical demonstrations in class. How boring would that become? Modesty then has its place, but so does liberty. And life thrives in the dynamic balance between them. Let's take an entirely different analogy. Let's consider a biological group. A species we'll call A. It has a natural enemy, B. One day, A gets furious at its natural enemy B and says, "Let us obliterate B." They gather their forces and knock out their natural enemy. Suddenly, after a while, they begin to weaken. They get overpopulated because there's nobody around to eat up their surplus members. They no longer have to keep their muscles tensed against an enemy. They begin to fall apart because they destroyed their enemy. What they should do is cultivate the enemy. That is the real meaning of love your enemy. There is such a thing as a beloved enemy. If you don't have a beloved enemy, in other words, if the flies and the spiders don't go together, there would be too many spiders or too many flies. These balances keep the course of nature going. It's the same dynamic as between libertines and prudes. They need each other. You should thank your prudish father and mother. You should be very grateful to them for making sex so interesting. So don't defy them completely. Don't go to your campus with signs bearing four-letter words because that's going to spoil the show. Every generation must react to the one before it, keeping this tension alive. It's this tension, this play of opposites, that creates the love that makes the world go round. Read any kind of spiritual literature you want, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Taoist. They all seem to emphasize the importance of detachment from the body and the physical world, so you won't be engulfed in the stream of impermanence. The idea is that, to the degree you identify yourself with the body and its pleasures, you become something that is simply swept away in the course of transience. Therefore, hold yourself aloof. For example, many Hindus practicing yoga are advised to view all sensory experiences as external phenomena they merely witness. You identify yourself with the eternal, spiritual, unchanging self, the witness of all that happens but remain unaffected. Like a mirror reflecting all things, you remain free from the stains and flaws of attachment. You'll find this perspective everywhere. However, it raises a significant problem. If the physical universe is viewed as a snare, why does it exist? Why would God, assuming he's responsible for creation, allow such a trap to be made? Some theologies consider the physical universe a mistake, a fall from divine grace, where spirits, like us, became trapped in animal bodies. There's an ancient analogy that likens the relationship between a person and their body to that of a rider and their horse. Saint Francis, for instance, referred to his body as Brother S. The old-fashioned view was to beat the body into submission. Freudian psychology offers a kinder approach, treating the body with sugar lumps rather than whips, but still as something to manage. Freud, for all his insight, retained a streak of Puritanism, viewing sex as degrading yet biologically necessary. This reflects a deeper historical divide, the rational, spiritual self versus the animalistic body. Success, then, comes from spiritualizing the animal component, cleaning up its urges. The ultimate caricature of this would be a perfect sexual relationship conducted on an operating table under disinfectant sprays. It's true that the physical world and its beauty are transient. After we pass the peak of youth, everything starts to decay. But rather than seeing this as tragic, I view it as part of life's splendor. Imagine reaching the age of 30 and being frozen there forever. You'd become a kind of animated waxwork. In fact, such permanence would make people feel like plastic, something artificial. Technology is already heading in this direction, offering ways to replace decaying body parts with skillfully manufactured plastic. Eventually, we might all become entirely plastic, perpetually youthful but utterly bored with one another. The vitality of life comes precisely from its transience. Life is change. Life is death. The same process of falling apart gives life its energy and vibrancy. Certain moments in life allow us to experience unparalleled vitality, just like when a conductor cues a group of violinists to come in at the perfect moment. Timing is everything. In love, sexuality, or gastronomy, success depends on knowing when to act and savoring the moment fully. Regret arises only when we fail to seize these opportunities. This principle ties directly to detachment as discussed in Buddhism, Taoism, and Hinduism. Detachment doesn't mean non-participation. You can live fully, have a rich sexual life, or relish sensory pleasures, while maintaining detachment. This doesn't mean going through life mechanically or with your thoughts elsewhere. It means full participation but without clinging. When you grasp at pleasure too tightly, you destroy it. I once knew a little girl who was so delighted with a bunny rabbit that she squeezed it to death with love. Parents often do this to their children, and spouses do it to each other. Life, with all its transient beauty, cannot be fully enjoyed unless you're willing to let go. The word abandonment is interesting. We speak of dissolute people as abandoned, but it can also describe saints. Jesuit Father Jean-Pierre de Caussade wrote a spiritual classic called Abandonment to Divine Providence. People like this are free. They cling to nothing. Such spiritual poverty is essential for enjoying any pleasure, especially sexual pleasure. I don't think I need to tell you that, in a very special and peculiar way, Western man is hung up on sex. The major reason for this is his religious background, which is quite unique among the religions of the world. I mean specifically Christianity and, in a secondary way, Judaism, at least insofar as Judaism in Europe and the United States is strongly influenced by Christianity. Christianity is, of all religions in the world, the one uniquely preoccupied with sex. More so than priapism, more so than tantric yoga, and more so than any kind of fertility cult that has ever existed on the face of the earth. There has never been a religion in which sexuality was so important. And there is a certain standard by which this can be judged. In popular speech, when you say of a person that they are living in sin, you know very well that you do not mean they are engaged in a business to defraud the public by selling badly made bread or running a check forgery.